warm welcome to all of our distinguished panelists and to all of you joining this conversation online from around the region. On behalf of UNFPA and Queisser Families Europe, welcome to our What's Next event, Expanding Choices Through Family-Friendly Policies. My name is Alana Armitage. I am the director of UNFPA's Regional Office for Eastern Europe and Central Asia, based in Istanbul, Turkey, and it is my great pleasure to be moderating this Facebook Live conversation today. For the next 90 minutes, you will hear from a superb panel, some of the leading voices in the field working to expand choices for women, men, and families with the aim of building more equal, prosperous, and demographically resilient societies. We'll start this event with two keynote speakers, Mara Jurks from Utrecht University and Monica Queisser from OECD, and then jump into our debate with Colin Scicluna from the European Commission, Annemie Dreiskens from Queisser Families Europe, Murat Yüksel from the Gitti Gidiyor company in Turkey, and Biljana Radonic Care-Lindsay from EBRD. We're also excited that Tina Bruno, the founder of Parent Smart Employers, is with us on the Facebook chat to answer some of your questions on family-friendly workplaces. But before I turn to our speakers, just a few words on UNFPA's vision and why this event is so important for us today. For UNFPA, families in all their diversity are at the heart of our work to promote universal access to sexual and reproductive health, eliminate gender-based violence, and end harmful practices against women and girls. And more than a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the crucial role played by families, especially women, and the struggles they have faced, caring for children, partners, and other relatives when care and education facilities are closed in many cases, while maintaining their paid work responsibilities. The COVID crisis has highlighted what we know already, that the existence or not of public social services such as childcare, care for older persons, and gender-responsive family policies have concrete effects on our progress on gender equality. But beyond that, expanding choices for families is also a centerpiece in the response to the dramatic demographic changes we're seeing in the region. As countries are struggling with the effects of population aging, low fertility rates, and outmigration, putting in place the right family policies is key for enabling people to have the number of children they want and plan their futures in their own countries. It's an essential part of the policy mix that is needed to prepare for and manage demographic change. So how should governments, the private sector, and civil society realize this vision? How do we better address the unequal distribution of unpaid domestic and care work, gender inequalities in the labor market, or the inability of people to have the number of children they want? How can we strengthen and support the families that we actually live in all their diversity, as a way to create a world where productive and reproductive life are in harmony? These are some of the interesting topics that we will cover today as we look towards gender-responsive family policies as a powerful tool for gender equality, demographic resilience, and socioeconomic growth. One last reminder before we begin, we are live streaming right now on Facebook, so please use the Facebook feed to post questions to the panelists or any comments or ideas you'd like to share with us. The UNFPA and Queisser teams will be monitoring to make sure we hear you and are able to address questions at the end of the panel. And don't forget to use the hashtag expanding choices and tag us, UNFPA ICARO and Queisser EU. Without further ado, I am very pleased to welcome our first keynote speaker, Dr. Mara Jurks. Mara is Associate Professor of Interdisciplinary Social Science at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. She's also the principal investigator of the project Capable, a comparative study on rethinking work-life policies and their impact in 8 European countries. Mara will be speaking about the evidence that underpins the case for gender-sensitive family policies, what it tells us, and why the gender dimension is so crucial. Mara, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you today. Let me start by saying that gender inequality in work and family is one of the most persistent social problems of the 21st century. 4 years ago, I used this sentence to open a presentation to the European Research Council in an attempt to secure funding for the 5-year research project just mentioned on gender inequality in work-life balance. That is, how individuals combine employment with other valued activities outside of work. Now, in 2021, after succeeding in obtaining funding, we're 2 years into the Capable project. We're also in the middle of a pandemic, and that statement is just as true now as it was then. Why is that? Why is it that despite decades of policy advancements, gender inequality in work life is so tenacious? With our Capable project, we are providing an answer to that question. The Capable project starts from the idea that the reason policies aimed at addressing gender inequalities in work and family have limited effects is because these policies, such as parental leave, carers leave, flexible working legislation, and childcare services, and the research we do on these policies, are often too focused on outcomes, like gender equality in paid work, or a focus for many of you, fertility outcomes. Focusing on the outcomes alone ignores the process that leads to these outcomes. This process starts with understanding how policies are designed. Various work-family policies, like the ones mentioned here on the screen, are presumed to lead to better gender equality outcomes, like a decline in gender employment gaps. For example, it's thought that if we just offer enough childcare services, gender equality in work and family will improve, with more mothers able to join paid employment, for example. But this argument is too simple, because it's not just about whether or not childcare is available. Other aspects of childcare policy design, like quality and affordability, also matter. The way in which these aspects of policy design matter differ in relation to individuals, depending upon their own characteristics, and how they are situated in differing local and national contexts. And this translation process ultimately influences what individuals are effectively able to do and be, that is, their capabilities. If we take the example of parental leave, many governments have worked to improve parental leave in recent decades. In some countries, most recently, because of the European Work-Life Balance Directive. In theory, this directive ensures that parents across Europe have equal access to parental leave by defining that 2 out of the 4 months of parental leave are non-transferable between parents. But in member states where parental leave is not fully paid, parents, and particularly fathers, are less likely to take leave because families cannot miss out on that income. Within the workplace and society, mothers and fathers face differing norms about what is seen to be acceptable behavior for working and caregiving, which may limit parents' use of leave or even prevent them from seeing taking leave as a possibility. Understanding work-life capabilities means understanding the missing link between policy and outcomes. And what Capable does is shed light on this complex process, this interaction of policy design in relation to individual, community, and societal factors, and how this affects what people are effectively able to do and be, their capabilities. When thinking about the question of what's next, which is the title of today's event, I'm suggesting that what we need to do is be thinking about developing and implementing sustainable, gender-responsive family policies, and that is key to addressing persistent gender inequalities in today's society. And when thinking about the question of what's next, I'd actually like you to think about two things. First, are we talking about expanding choices, or are we expanding capabilities? Work and family research shows us the multiple barriers that people face in their personal situation, their family and household situations, and the complex local, organizational, regional, and national contexts in which choices are made. My first takeaway message is that expanding choices means looking beyond the concept of choice to think about what people are effectively able to do and be, their capabilities. My second takeaway message is that to expand capabilities means looking beyond the introduction of policies to thinking carefully about their design, to ensure that they act as a resource for both men and women in creating an enabling environment for multiple valued activities, such as work or caregiving. From my perspective, that is what gender-responsive policies do. They consider the way in which gender shapes how individuals engage with policies, and whether these policies are truly a resource in practice, and for whom. So how do we ensure gender-responsive policies are developed? For starters, by being aware of what we call the normative reference point of a policy. The normative reference point simply tells us what the policy intends to achieve and who it aims to help. It also tells us what the implicit signal of a policy is. For example, if childcare services are developed in the public sector as a child's right, this signals that childcare services are good for children and their development. In contrast, if childcare services are developed in the private sector with subsidies attached to parents' employment status, this normative reference point can signal that childcare services are simply a labor market instrument, a means to get more people working. And these two different normative reference points and the ensuing design of these policies, including their availability, their accessibility, quality, affordability, and flexibility, lead to different outcomes. So as you continue through the rest of today's event, I'd like you to think about the following question. What is the normative reference point for the policy or policies that you're developing? Thus, what does it intend to do, and for whom? And how might different aspects of its design lead to expanding or limiting what individuals are effectively able to do or be? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mara, for those extremely interesting reflections. I think you've left us with a lot of ideas to discuss. I really appreciate your idea about, expanding choices means looking beyond the concept of choice. We need to look to the concept of capabilities and the enabling environment that enable these choices. So you've just posed a very important question for us to think about as we go forward. What is the normative reference point, and who is it that we are actually aiming our policies at? So thank you so much for that. We'll come back to you at the end. I'm sure there may be questions for you. Now I would like to introduce Monica Queisser, our second keynote speaker. Monica is the head of the Social Policy Division at the OECD, where she coordinates the work on social protection, social indicators, and family and LGBTI+ policies. She also manages the OECD Gender Initiative. Monica will share with us new evidence on the relationship between gender-sensitive, family-friendly policies and economic growth. Thank you again, Monica, for being with us. I pass you the floor.
Thank you so much, Alana, and thank you to everybody for having the OECD here with you. Let me just share my screen. And you will not be surprised that I have brought for you today some data and some international comparisons from the OECD. Now, this fits very nicely with what we just heard from Mara, because I wanted to show you a little bit of evidence on what's going on in terms of childcare policies and family policies in OECD countries. And we have at the OECD what we call the family database and the social expenditure databases, where we monitor regularly what countries are spending for. And I would like to draw your attention here to these data on how the composition looks like for family spending in different member countries of the OECD. And if you look at the left-hand side, you can see that there are three different types of spending. There's cash, services, and tax breaks. Services is what we generally see as childcare. Those are childcare services which are available and accessible to families. And the rest is cash benefits, which are child benefits and tax breaks sometimes for families. And you can see that some of those countries at the left-hand side, we have France, Hungary, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, but also Iceland. And if you look at those countries that are the top performers for women, for gender equality in general, in international comparisons, but also for female labor force participation, those are the ones that offer more services than cash. So you can see that these services are a very important element of family spending in those countries that are seeking to support families, but also further gender equality in the labor market and beyond. Now, why is that so? You can, of course, also give lots of cash to families and say that everybody can choose how they're going to spend this. The problem is that buying exclusively private services in the market with those cash benefits will be a very expensive thing to do. And almost no benefit system can be so generous that it will replace the public provision of services. So what our message at the OECD is that the mix of the different types of spending is extremely important, and depending how you design the composition of the different spending items, you will get different effects in the labor market and in different effects for the reconciliation of work and family life. Now, of course, everybody can choose what they take up, as Mara was just said, but take just the example of a single mother who has to go out to work because no OECD country offers cash benefits which will keep her and her children out of poverty on purely the basis of cash spending. So the government, if there's no public provision of childcare services and out of school hour services also for those children that are beyond early ages and go to school, then it will be very difficult for the single mother to sustain her family through work because there's simply no option for her to buy all of those services to go out to work. So this is one of the important messages, is that the composition matters and that it differs very strongly across different OECD countries. And you can see this, that the composition is also reflected on the indicators that we then see in terms of family well-being and gender equality in the labor market and beyond. The second point that I wanted to make is the economic growth impact. Now, we looked at the OECD, and this will not surprise you. The first calculations we did was actually for the G20. When the G20 asked us under the Australian presidency to do some calculations to look at how more gender equality in the labor market could boost economic growth. And we've been developing this further since, and we're looking at the boost of economic growth you can get in different countries, and I've brought a choice of countries here for you to see. There's the Nordic countries on the left-hand side, and then there's some other countries, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, and United States. And here you can see that if we succeed in closing the gender gap in labor force participation rates between men and women by 2040, we would get quite a boost. Those are only the blue ones. But this is assuming, these blue bars, that the hours worked, the difference between men and women in hours worked would stay the same. So you get some boost, but the really big bang you would be getting if men and women fully close the gap in working hours and in labor force participation. And you can see that you could get a very substantial percentage point difference in some of the countries where women are working a lot of part-time, much fewer hours than today than men. For example, on the right-hand side, if you look at Germany, but also Italy is the country where we get the largest bang. There's also some other countries which I have not brought along, for example, Japan, where you would also get a very strong boost. And if you mix this with another link to fertility and population aging, those are also the countries where fertility rates are low, where demographic aging is quite rapid, and where these countries will desperately need more people in the labor market to sustain their social protection systems and their economic growth. So here's an easy way to go about doing things. getting this bang, but it will not be possible without family policies. And then a final point I would like to make is when we talk about gender responsive family policies, there's some kind of implicit assumption amongst most people that this is somehow to do with women more than with men. But at the OECD, we have now just found out that really the most effective way to change the balance in work and family life reconciliation policies and the use of these policies is to focus more on fathers, because it is the fathers who could provide more unpaid work at home, and if they did so, it would be much easier for women to go out and work more hours. You would also be able to nudge this choice a little bit more. It's of course a free choice. For good reason, governments are not in the business of telling families how they should divide their responsibilities and share their working hours and of unpaid and paid work. But more and more countries are finding it very useful to devote a significant amount of leave, parental leave, to fathers. And this is that only fathers can take it and that it is a wastable one. But it is not sufficient just to have this leave. You also have to make sure that fathers can actually take it by giving them relatively well remunerated character. We have 2 member countries in the OECD which have the most fathers leave, Korea and Japan. The problem is nobody takes them, so you don't need only the disposition, but you also need the societal acceptance. And that is, I think, an area which we all still have to continue working on. Let me stop here and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica. That was an excellent presentation. Really interesting point that the top performers on gender equality in labor markets are the ones that provide services and that cash cannot replace the provision of services. And you gave a great example of a situation of single mothers and the limitation of cash transfers to buy services that may not be available. I think the positive link between closing gender gap in labor and its impact on economic development, another really strong point, as well as its link to fertility and population aging. And none of this will be possible without family policies. So, and then finally, your message on the fact that this is not only to do with women. We really need to also focus on fathers but also ensure that fathers actually take parental leave. So we need that social norm change as well. So really, really strong presentation. Thank you. Thanks to both of our keynote speakers for their really rich and relevant presentations. And before we begin the panel discussion and reflect further on some of the issues that Mara and Monica raised, we have a short video to show on how family-friendly policies will have an impact on young people and those who are deciding whether they want or can have a family. So we spoke to people from across the region to ask them what barriers they face and what support they needed to achieve their careers, families, and lives that they desired. So let's take a look at this video and see how they responded.
I would say it's childcare.
Meți continuare.
Să avem o economie stabilă.
Venituri suficiente.
Să fie condiții normale de viață.
Временные сложности были, конечно. По работе 6 дней мы работали, до сих пор 6-дневка у нас. Хотелось бы, конечно, в то время тоже на 5-дневку перейти, но...
Trebuie să aibă un salariu decent și cred că să fie dragoste.
Un trai mai bun, bineînțeles.
It's crucial to have more flexible job so that a person can witness the children growing up and also do their job.
Susținerea mamelor care sunt însărcinate, ca viitoarelor mame, da? Prin păstrarea mai ușoară, să zicem, a locului de muncă, când revin înapoi, cu toate că prin legile toate sunt, dar uneori realitatea e alta.
Lucru bun, încredere în sine, чтобы нормальные условия жизни, как в любой стране, высокие доходы. Ну и работа так же, как в других странах, а не как здесь. Что надо сделать?
Shu ishim 3gacha bo'lsa, keyin qolgan vaqtimni farzandlarim, oilam davrasida bo'lishini mana shunaqa balans deb bilaman. Կարծում եմ մեկը մյուսի հաշվին երբեք չպետք է կազմակերպել, չպետք է մեկը մյուսի պատճառով տուժի, պետք է կարողանալ կազմակերպել օրվա գրաֆիկը այնպես, որ լիարժեք հավասար ժամանակ տրամադրվի թե մեկին, թե մյուսին։ Եվ դրա իրացումը առօրյայում պատկերացնում եմ ինքնակազմակերպվածության եւ ճիշտ կողակից ունենալու մեջ։
Ես տրամադրեմ այդ իմ ազատ ժամանակը ինչքան հնարավոր է առաջ իմ ընտանիքին։
I like to have a few kids, and while having a part-time job, I would be able to devote my time to them. But after raising them and taking to kindergarten or school, I would prefer to have a full-time job while working 8 hours per day. Only in this way I would be able to ensure my position in today's competitive labor market.
Just to have 2 children and concentrate on my work and of course on my family.
Oddiy menimcha ishlaydigan, misol davlat ishida ishlaydimi, qanday bo'lsa ham o'zini faoliyatini jamiyatga o'z hissasini qo'shayotgan ayollar, misol oilalilar haftasiga yakshanba kunlari o'zini dam olish kunlari bor. U paytda albatta o'zini oila davrasida farzandlari bo'lsa farzandlari bilan, turmush o'rtog'i bilan o'tkazish, boshqa paytlari kun bo'yi emas-ku, lekin ish bilan ham chegaralanmasdan o'tkazishni tasavvur qilgan bo'lardim o'zim shaxsiy hayotimda.
Достойную жизнь.
Great. I hope that this video can be a source of inspiration as we move on to our panel discussion. I have some very interesting insights from the region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, showing us how family policies can have an impact on everyone at the personal level and why people want and really need them. So for those of you who have just joined us now, we are on Facebook Live. This is the What's Next event on expanding choices through family-friendly policies. We have a very interesting group of people now that will reflect on the importance of gender-responsive family policies. And I would like to welcome to the panel Colin Shikluna, Head of Cabinet of the European Commission's Vice President for Democracy and Demography, Annemie Dreiskens, President of Queisser Families Europe, Murat Yüksel, Chief People and Culture Officer of the Gitti Gidiyor Company in Turkey, and Biljana Radonic-Kerr-Lindsay, who is the Associate Director, Gender and Economic Inclusion at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD. Welcome, dear panelists. And my first question is for you, Colin. We know about the commitment of the European Commission to gender equality and that the EU has a work-life balance directive. But tell us, please, why does the EU think that inclusive, gender-responsive work-life policies are so important? Colin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alana, and thank you very much to the 2 keynote speakers for giving us a great deal of food for thought. Well, first of all, I think that the European Union is itself, its aspirations are very much predicated on peace, on security, on prosperity. And a very important part of achieving these objectives lies in the recognition and in the promotion of rights. And rights for us very much includes the concept of gender equality. Especially at a time when in a number of places we're seeing, including in some of our own member states, that there is an attempt to reopen the debate on equality. And for us, for the European Union, for the European Commission, equality is not a question of relative physical comparisons. Equality is about rights. So the fact of seeking to achieve equality between men and women is a question of achieving rights and of giving rights and acknowledging rights. So a very important part of this, of course, are the policies, many of them social policies, but not only, which seek to ensure that there is this gender parity, that there is this equality, which itself then translates into more stable families, into more productive families. And of course, while we cannot say in the European Union that we have family policies as such, we do have a number of policies which do benefit the family as a very important, as a crucial social unit that is to be safeguarded. And I need to make this caveat because we need to walk a fine line. In fact, the tightrope walker that Mara depicted was very familiar to me, because we have to walk a fine line between what is our own competence at the European level and the competences that each member state has. And in this sector, specifically in the case of family, there are significant differences between what is considered to be a family between one member state and another. Of course, from the European perspective, there is a very broad definition of what should constitute a family, but ultimately we want to make sure that we have policies in place that will ensure that everyone has the same opportunities to have a family where they can have as many children as they wish to have. It's not a question of our telling them how many they should have, but if people are not able to have as many as they wish, then there is an issue that we need to address. But also to make sure that the workplace is a more welcoming place, that opportunities are available to all in the same way. We still have, even in the European Union, a situation where there is a gender pay gap, a significant gender pay gap, and that's something that is in this day and age should be intolerable. So we need to continue to find ways to address these imbalances. And of course, we can't speak about all of these issues without saying a word about the COVID pandemic as well, where we've seen that in many respects women have been impacted far more significantly. Both as a result of the fact that they are the primary caregivers, because they are the ones who are supplementing education in the home, because they are the ones who are very frequently in the front line, also because very frequently they have been the ones who lost their jobs before anybody else. So this is something that we really need to keep in the forefront of our policies as we go towards the recovery.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Colin, and I will come back to you shortly, but you've already raised some really critical points for us. I think the major one being that equality is about rights, and that for the EU, social policies, including family policies, are critical for ensuring the EU's aspirations of peace, security, and prosperity, stable and productive families. You've also raised the issue, which from UNFPA's perspective is a very important one, which is that member states differ in their views on family policies, on families, but I think the point is that we can all share with each other best practices, and that individuals within families should and do have the right to decide on the number and spacing of their children, and that workplaces should be welcoming. So thank you for those very important points. I'll come back to you soon. And now I turn to Annemie. Thank you again, Annemie, for embarking with us on this event and for the great partnership that we share with Queisser. My question for you is, as an organization that represents multiple organizations working with families across Europe, can you please reflect on why inclusive, gender-responsive work-life policies are so important for gender equality, for families, and for people in general? Annemie, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here today with you for this important debate. And as you mentioned already, Queisser is a pluralistic network of 50+ family organizations. And we really want to ensure all families without discrimination have access to sufficient services, available services also, and also sufficient financial resources and time to care. It was clear from the video that you showed that these are the three key needs for families. So the RST, let's keep this in mind. This is our mantra. And especially the work-life support is key for guaranteeing women and men equal opportunities and offer them real choices and time to care for their children so that they can enjoy their family life that they choose in dignity without having to choose between work and family. And time to care and a good work-life balance is also important to address and to prevent poverty. It is reducing also the stress in families if they have time to care. And this is also a very important aspect for the health and well-being of children. So they are also in the scope of those measures. And today we all know that women have gained an important place in the labor market. But reconciling work and care is for most of the women still a daily challenge. And according to recent fundings, almost all mothers in Europe provide daily care to their children, compared to 6 out of 10 men. And in numbers of hours, I would say the care gap is even more evident. Globally, we see that women do 3 times the amount of unpaid care work than men do. And this trend has been fairly stable. And we could say at the current rate, we will not reach gender equality in care until over more than 200 years from now on. So for COFACE, it is clear it is time for change and for more gender-sensitive family policies. And we take different initiatives together with the Commission. We're happy to work together and with other partners. First of all, we want to support women and recognize their invisible work. This unpaid work makes society going. And COFACE is an important partner in the fight for social recognition of family carers. Secondly, and that was already mentioned by Monica, we would like to involve men more in the care. So encourage men to better share the care and encourage fathers also to take up family leaves. And the European Work-Life Balance Directive, where we fight it so hard to have it, this is a key instrument to trigger positive change in our view. It was already mentioned by Colin, but this directive is now in a full transposition phase at national level. So, and it is obliged member states to install adequately paid family leaves. Well-paid leaves are crucial, not only for women, so they can take them, but also for men, because there is still a challenge for men to reduce their income for the family. So if the family leaves are well paid, then it is also more accessible for men. And our members of COFACE are today pushing at national level to have really the transposition of this directive and to have well-paid, flexible family leaves. Another important piece of the puzzle, I would say, work-life balance is a puzzle, is that family-friendly workplace. In companies, at work, a lot can be done. So it's not only leaves who are important, legislation is important, rights indeed are important, but it's also at work that a lot can be done to allow or to stimulate women and men to better reconcile work and family. And more companies realize this, luckily, and they showcase also that a business model that promotes work-life balance is a win-win. It allows women to stay at work while they are caring for their children, their elderly people. And fathers and mothers, both, they have the feeling, if they have the feeling that they are working at a company that supports work-life balance, they experience less of work-family conflict and they raise productivity. So it is also good for the economy to combine work-life balance. So we need, I would say, we need more companies and more men as work-life balance ambassadors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annemie. Excellent points. Just recapping a couple of them that I caught, which I think are very important. The issue of families need time to care. Families shouldn't have to choose, and men or women or men shouldn't have to choose between work and family. The invisible work of women, as you said, keeps society going. So we need to address this burden of care on women issue and achieve gender equality. And then on the family-friendly workplace, the fact that the business model that promotes a work-life balance is actually win-win, good for companies, good for individuals, good for the economy. I'm very happy that we have right now one of UNFPA's private sector partners on this panel, Murat from Gitti Gidiyor, the Turkish arm of the online marketplace eBay, and he can speak to just that. So Murat, can you tell us what is Gitti Gidiyor doing to support its employees in balancing their work and life responsibilities?
Thank you very much. Hello, first of all, thank you very much for inviting Gitti Gidiyor to this important and meaningful event. In Gitti Gidiyor, we encourage our employees to spare enough time for their life outside of work to ensure a healthy work-life balance. There are many policies and tools we have implemented in this regard. I'll give you a couple of examples which are within the scope of this panel. In fact, work-life balance has been always an important topic for us before the pandemic. We have already had policies in place like flexible working hours, work from home policies. During the pandemic, we know that everybody's life has changed dramatically, and we have been working from home for more than 1.5 years. During this time, actually, we published the Gitti Gidiyor remote work regulation. With this regulation, we aim to reduce Zoom fatigue, support a healthy work-life balance, increase efficiency in meetings, support each other, and focus on what is important. For these purposes, we as the People and Culture Department asked all our colleagues to make important promises and declare that we are institutionally responsible for those commitments. In our surveys, we found out from our employees who have children that staying at home causes a decrease in physical activity of the children. For this reason, we organize periodic sessions for online home gym activities, rhythm workshops, so that they can have fun with their children. In addition, all our employees can use the I don't feel good leave whenever they need it. In this context, we can take 1 day off without stating any health report or without deducting this from our paid time leave. Apart from what we do during pandemic, Gitti Gidiyor Parenthood Manifesto is also another example for work-life balance, I guess. As a strong brand that cares about social development and takes responsibility in this regard, we prepared our manifesto to prevent business and career life from stealing a role from parenthood. Extending leaves sometimes is not enough, as Monica mentioned. You need to ensure your employees that they can use those leaves in comfort. With our manifest, which also includes adoption, we as Gitti Gidiyor commit that all our employees will preserve their current positions, wage, and other rights during 20 weeks of maternity and 12 weeks of paternity and adoption leave. And this leave will not negatively affect the career of our employees. We offer employees many fringe benefits before and after maternity, paternity leave. All our employees can benefit from our company's psychological counseling support during the pre-pregnancy period. Our employee and spouse can benefit, from our training programs, ranging from parent training to stress management. Employees can get help and counseling from the Guide Mother and Guide Father network formed by their colleagues who have gone through this similar processes. In addition, during their leave, they can receive update from their teams about ongoing business processes or hold one-to-one meetings with their managers if they request. These are, as I said, these are some examples that we have in Gitti Gidiyor for work-life balance.
Thank you, Murat. This is just fantastic. I mean, really, congratulations to Gitti Gidiyor. You're really a best practice on combining business and career life with parenthood. I think you're going to have a lot of applications to your company after this event. Just the whole idea of trust in the company and people feeling free and able to use their leave, I think is so important. So really, congratulations. We're running a bit behind time already, so I'm going to try to stop talking so much when I react to the great things that you're saying. Let me now move to Biljana from the EBRD. EBRD funds large-scale projects in many countries and specifically includes a focus on gender and access to employment. So Biljana, can I ask you please, what is the importance of investing in gender-responsive family policies for the EBRD? And what returns are you expecting from this investment?
Thank you. That's a very good question. But first of all, I would like to say how pleased I am to join today's distinguished panel, because we at the EBRD, we very much appreciate and often rely on a lot of comprehensive and holistic analysis and best practices on gender responsive, family friendly policies that are produced by UNFPA, by OECD and other institutions. So before I answer, I just want to say a little bit about EBRD for those in our audience that don't know us. It's an international financial institution which promotes inclusive and sustainable market economies by investing primarily in the private sector in nearly 40 countries, from Central Europe to Central Asia and Southern and Eastern Mediterranean. And we do that across a variety of sectors, from agribusiness to manufacturing, financial institutions, tourism. So a lot of my interventions would be in relation to this area where we work. Private sector is also where we have the biggest leverage, and as we are often one of the biggest lenders in a particular country. So our approach to gender and economic inclusion rests on three pillars. We promote access to skills and employment. We promote access to finance and entrepreneurship, and access to services that increase economic opportunities. For women, women are one of our three key target groups, alongside youth and people in remote regions. But we also work with other economically underserved groups, such as people with disabilities, etc. So in line with our own mandate and where we have the biggest leverage, if you wish, our focus is concentrated on increasing equal opportunities at the level of our private sector clients, eliminating gender-based violence, and promoting care economy. So it was fantastic to hear from the Turkish companies the great work that they've been doing. We are also encouraging and supporting and very often conditioning our clients whenever it's needed through legally binding loan agreements to improve their corporate policies on equal opportunities, with a particular focus on women employees. But that, of course, has a positive impact on men and families in general. So we work with businesses to ensure recruitment, retention, promotion, flexible working, parental leave, all the things that we mentioned that promote opportunities. And why? What is the return of investment? We see this as a win-win situation. This is good business practice for our clients because it reduces turnover of staff that is very costly, such as when women do not return, for example, to work after maternity leave. It improves staff engagement and productivity, as we heard from previous speakers, and it's good for the bottom line. But at the same time, it's good as a way of increasing women's labor force participation and access to broader economic opportunities. A recent report by ILO and Gallup shows that in each of the 162 countries that have been assessed, the main challenges that women face at work was either to maintain a work-family balance or to have access to quality and affordable care. And so these are the bread and butter, and we all are trying to see what can we do there. So lack of access to child and elderly care services is really a major obstacle for women's full participation in the economy, both in the EBRD's countries of operations and beyond. And we know that globally over 70% of women leaving the labor force cite care responsibility as the main reason. That's why we are at EBRD, we are working with our private sector clients and our partner governments as well to address these challenges, both at the enterprise level, but also at the policy level in developing these gender responsive, family friendly policies and strategies. So I'll stop here.
Excellent, Biljana. Thank you. Really, thank you very much. And great to know that as one of the biggest lenders in the region, that the EBRD, targets women along with youth and other populations in the region. And I think you made a very good case for the return on investment, that care responsibilities really are the main challenge for women. So gender responsive family policies are good for business, good for women, and good for the family, as you said. Really great points. So Anami, and now I'm going to have to ask all of you to be a little bit shorter in the responses, given the lack of time, and we do have some questions on the chat. Anami, following up on the issue of results and based on the experience of COFACE, what has been one of the more interesting or surprising things that you've discovered when working on this issue?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Indeed, we learned a lot because the work-life balance is for many years on our radar. And as in so many fields, we learned also that the solution often starts at home. Gender equality in the labor market and the economy goes hand in hand with gender equality in the family. So we need first and foremost recognize the invisible work that is done in the family. And as I said already, the family carer must have an ensured and social status. At the same time, we need also to relieve women carers by boosting investment in community-based care services. And also by, as was said before, involving men in care. Men should say, we should encourage men and say, dare to care. Or if we say in COFACE, women more at work and men more at home, could be a slogan of a campaign to raise awareness. Because our family is a teamwork, so it should be a teamwork really. I just wanted to highlight also that the pandemic has shifted the burden of care on families, especially on women, like never before, and has magnified the vulnerabilities of families. We are all in the same storm, but not in the same boat. So there are families who are really vulnerable. But the corona pandemic has also acted as a wake-up call and has put the focus on families as the main safety net and highlighted the core economy, their role in this core economy, because they provide emotional, financial, and material support in this time. And especially women and carers, they are today the essential workers. They keep people and communities alive. So they are the backbone of our society. And we cannot let this awareness fade away. So we need really to seize the opportunity, this momentum, to introduce transformative measures to support families, to redesign care, and also to redistribute the care, to close the gender care gap. And I would say for inspiration for those measures, we have built a policy brief, The Changing Face of Work and Family under COVID-19, where you can find inspiring practices and measures that are taken at national level to support families in those difficult times. And I just wanted to highlight that in Spain, they took the measure that paternity leave, they introduced paternity leave of 16 weeks, and they equalized paternity leave with maternity leave. That's a good example for really fully gender equal measures that we fully approve. So that's a lot that we learned, but there is still a lot of work to do naturally. But
Excellent. No, really, really good points. Thank you, Anami. Dare to care. I think that's wonderful. And also thanks for sharing those great examples from the region and the work that you've been doing at COFACE. I actually have a follow-up question now for Biljana. I wanted to go back and forth a little bit if that's possible. Biljana, what have been some of the most interesting results, according to you, that you've witnessed from the public and private sectors investing in this?
I would say that this point that we mentioned before about the costs of staff turnover, especially among women, most often due to the unaddressed childcare burden. A lot of our clients do not realize, and they need to really be told in a way we bring in some researchers to look at their expenses, to be told how much it actually costs them. This is something that we see arranging separation of existing employees, recruitment, onboarding, training of new employees, lost productivity until the new employee reaches full productivity, loss of institutional knowledge. A lot of these things are not taken into account. And once we send a researcher into our companies to find why should the businesses really care about this. And in one of our case studies I'd like to share with you, actually happens to be in Turkey. We found that the cost of the staff turnover in one Turkish agribusiness firm of about 800 workers was over $900,000 per year. indirect and indirect costs, such as lost productivity. This was equivalent of about 14% of the company's annual revenues in Turkey back in 2017. So just that was really striking. When all the costs are taken into account, we make a business case to our clients that the benefits of investing in care provision, in other family-friendly policies really offsets all the upfront investments that they are making.
Thank you so much, Biljana. Yes, very interesting. So it's not just benefits that accrue from family-friendly policies, but it's the cost of lost productivity if you don't have them. And you mentioned Turkey as a case study, so that's a good transition back to Murat. And Murat, after listening and reflecting on the results of your work, what benefits have you already observed for Gidi Gidiyor, your employees, including yourself, if you can talk about that?
In fact, let me start like that. I mean, one of our main goals is to provide a work environment where everybody feels, good and can establish a work-life balance. As Gidi Gidiyor, we have a corporate culture that supports gender equality and tries to raise awareness on this issue to the highest level, both inside and outside the company. When it comes to gender equality, women come to mind first. However, this issue concerns both women and men. As Gidi Gidiyor, we know how important it is for an individual who has become a new parent to be with their child, to spare time for it, and to be able to work from home at the same time. For this reason, the fact that fathers as well as mothers have rights that they can benefit from, knowing that they can benefit from these rights, and when they have children, make our employees feel good and safe, just as we aimed. For example, let me give you an example. Last May, where there was a curfew due to pandemic restrictions, after a long break, children were allowed to go out for 4 hours. During these 4 hours, we requested not to hold any meetings at the company and not to engage in business communication with our parent employees, waiting for an answer. After a long time, we didn't want to take their chances of taking their kids out and spending time with them. In addition, we allow all our employees to take a break from their busy schedule by giving half a day off on Fridays in the afternoon during the summer months. Another positive feedback from employees is about being on maternity or paternity leave never affects on employees' right to be promoted. All these practices cause positive results for employee retention and productivity. Finally, I would say Gidi Gidiyor is a place where an employee can both do his or her job and be a member of various employee groups for empowering women, LGBTI, disabled people, and work on important projects to increase awareness both in and outside of the company.
Thank you, Murat. Again, really, you sound like just a model company to work for, and I'm sure that you will have many people lining up at the door. Colin, after all of this work and commitment and the great things that we've heard so far, can you tell us what is the EU's and your personal vision for equal, gender-responsive, and prosperous societies?
Well, first of all, I want to say just how impressed I am by what I've heard from Murat, from all the other speakers, of course. But this last measure, I think, is something that's so sensitive to the needs of people, and it reminds me as well of some of the work that's going on within the EU on the right to disconnect, which is not specific to is not specifically a gender-related measure, but it is something which, in the long run, can have a very positive impact on families, in my view. So, and it is very similar. I think the long-term objective is one where we can really say that although we've had significant achievements in the past few years, and I think we should acknowledge those achievements, but there's still such a lot that remains to be done. And we need to be very, very honest and very open about that. And especially from the point of view of policymakers, I think we have two key responsibilities. We need to legislate, but we also need to educate. because I think a lot of the issues that we're dealing with over here have to do also with mentalities, with the fact that that people have a certain approach, have a certain vision or a view of how lives should be led, but they're not necessarily aware of the impact of these views. And I think we need to have a broader debate about how important it is to be able to offer truly equal opportunities. The reality is, and this is very much linked, I think, to the whole idea behind work-life balance policies. The reality is that in most cases, the cards are stacked against women. You know, very often, many people take it that's just the way things are, but it can't be the way things are. There are many things that can be done, that need to be done to address this, and to be able, for example, Monica mentioned earlier demographic aging. Now, it's a very good, significant achievement that in Europe in particular, we are living longer and healthier lives. But it means that our labor market needs to be more welcoming, needs to be broader. And one of the most obvious sources of that could be having more women in the labor market. And to do that, we need to make sure that women are not only able to access the labor market, but they're able to do that without structural obstacles. So if a woman wants to have a family and a career, then there should be no difficulty whatsoever for that to happen. And we need to make sure that it's not just specific social policies or employment policies, but it needs to be across the board. There needs to be an approach which makes all of this come together in a comprehensive way.
Thank you very much, Colin. Excellent points. I think one of the points that you raised, which is really important, is around the social norms, right? So even if we do have these equal opportunities, the fact that the cards are stacked against women, as you said, means that we really have to change those norms in order to take advantage of the opportunities as well. And the shift in laws and policies, we also have to shift to make that cultural change. So for that reason, I must say, take advantage here to say thank you to the EU on behalf of UNFPA and UN Women, as we receive support from the EU in a program to change social norms, which actually does include looking at new models of fatherhood, parenthood, etc. And of course, the whole issue of demographic change and the important role that you are playing and the Vice President is playing in this area, I think, is crucial. And gender responsive family policies are such a central pillar to us addressing that demographic change. So with that, I want to thank our dear panelists for the rich and interesting discussion, and invite you all to respond to some of the questions that we've received already on our Facebook live streaming. Let me see, we have quite a few questions here. Let me start with, what is a great example of what is offered in a role model workplace? Okay, so we already heard a great example of what is offered in a role model workplace. Which are the top 3 wins? And I think this is a question for Murat. Which are the top 3 wins for companies or organizations supporting their working parents, according to you, Murat? I can ask you that question.
Thank you very much. In fact, I mean, Z generation is coming to the business life, and we will have young parents eventually, and we need to understand that young parents are a bit different than the previous parents. Their needs are different, their styles are different, and with this pandemic, we understand that work-life balance is getting more important than ever. So if you become a parent-friendly company, as all of us mentioned, you will get, as a company, you will get, high retention, low attrition, and you will get more productivity. I can give you an example about it from Gitti Gidiyor. We have an employee council. Every year, each department selects their representatives, and as People and Culture Department, we meet at the Employee Council bi-weekly and discuss all these, requests, all these needs, future needs. So, as I mentioned, all those policies, procedures have been prepared by our Employee Council and or by our, employee groups. As people department, we don't do it by ourselves only. We always ask our employees, what do you need, what do you want, what do you need, so that when you increase the democracy in the company, you get the productivity and retention.
Murad, let me, there was another question for you. So, and you've touched upon it already, but just how has COVID-19 adjusted your HR policies? I think you've pretty much answered that. I just wanted the person said a number of tech giants in the West have already announced their plans for this new normal. And is Gidiyor also planning more flexible approaches to allow employees better work-life balance? I think you've pretty much answered that, but if you want to say anything additional to that comment.
Yeah, actually we have already, work from home policies, flexible working hours, but of course we are now designing the future of work. We are a part of eBay, we are a part of the global people department, so we are following up the global procedures. We will probably announce our new model shortly.
Okay, good to know. We'll be waiting to hear about it. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry,
go ahead, Anami, please, go ahead.
You are talking about the win-wins. I would like to join the debate, and I would say the lack of work-life balance has also a very important social cost, namely a health cost. A lot of people are going to burn out because they cannot combine it. So we should also be aware of this cost, and there's also a reason to invest in good work-life balance to avoid this cost and to avoid this loss of staff for a long, long time.
Super point, absolutely, yes. All right, Monica, there was a question for you on the chat. You mentioned the case of single mothers. Could you elaborate on what governments and private sector can do to avoid excluding different forms of families from such policies?
Thank you very much for that question. It's indeed a very interesting one because we do need a package of different measures to address the specific issues that single parents face, not only mothers, also fathers. It's the same story. So what happens is that, as I said previously in my presentation, the cash benefits in no country for single parents are sufficient to get beyond the poverty line if you don't work. So if you're just dependent on cash benefits, you and your children will be in poverty. So that's a very clear sign that it's essential for single parents to be attached to the labor market. Now, the tax and benefit systems in many countries are such that there's a very high marginal tax rate for parents, for single parents, who leave benefits and go to work. Because what happens is that from one day to the next, you receive a benefit, then you start working, and then you have to pay taxes and social security contributions on it. So from every dollar you earn, in some countries, you might have less than 50 cents left over. And then actually, this could even lead to a situation where you're worse off working than you were while you were on benefit. So that's a very important area which we have to address. Now and we've done this at the OECD, and you will find this on our website, take this situation and add childcare costs to it. So that's even without taking into account childcare costs. In some countries, childcare costs are very high. Some OECD member countries like Switzerland or Ireland have still quite high childcare costs. Now, if a single person, single mother, father, single parent has to also pay that out of their purse, and they're facing these high tax rates, then it's literally impossible for them to go back to work. So we need a combination of good and accessible childcare facilities, so access to good childcare, including, as I said before, not only for very young children, but for out of school hours care, because often people concentrate on very young children, but actually the trouble in many cases starts once kids start going to school, because they have unpredictable hours. They might have just a few hours one day, different hours the next day. So you need additional help. So you'd also need very reliable out of school hours care. And then you need to combine that with proper attention and modeling and adaptation of the tax and benefit systems in each of the countries.
Thank you, Monica. This is really important for UNFPA in our work to support member states in the formulation of such policies, because I think, you know, what we see, and I don't know if you would agree with me, but what we see is that often family policies then are based on an ideal model of the family and not taking into account the specificities of the diverse family forms, including single parenthood, including those who are in partnership, families with children with disabilities. I mean, what you're raising here is fundamental, I think, in terms of having a contextualized approach to the development and design of gender responsive family policy. So we'll make sure to be following up on that point. We have another question here. In Eastern Europe and Central Asia, women also take care of older family members. What can we do to intensify the pace of change and build a social acceptance that this is a shared responsibility of men and women? Are there any of our panelists who would like to take on that question?
I'd be happy to speak a bit to that.
Okay,
Alana, if that's
Mara,
all right.
yes.
I think in any case, and this has come up, I think, at several points in today's panel, that we need to be having discussions about gender norms around caregiving and working and the roles that men and women take on. And when we see, particularly in a lot of, indeed, in Central and Eastern European countries, the idea is that women are then taking on this primary caregiving responsibility. Unless we start conversations about why that is and how that might shift, then nothing will actually happen to change those norms. And people don't even see these opportunities as a possibility. But one of the things we're seeing is that some of the pressure is coming from the decentralization of a lot of care that's used to take place, for example, through state policies towards local governments. And their difficulty in trying to provide those care situations put families in very difficult situations where they're having to make choices. And then women, when they're being paid less, are the more obvious choice for taking on these caregiving responsibilities. So I think this comes back to what Monica was just saying about needing proper policy packages that ensure that, for example, pay gaps are smaller, that there are sufficient services for older people during the day, for example, to allow women to take part in caregiving, but also to provide enough financial incentives to make caregiving an activity that's possible for both men and women.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mara. All right, we have
also
yes,
perhaps come in here. What we found, and somebody mentioned that already, that in many Central and Eastern European countries, women on average spend nearly 5 hours per day on unpaid domestic and care work. For men, that's less than 2 hours. In our countries, Azerbaijan, with 6 hours, is sort of front runner. Those women who provide informal care to elderly parents or relatives are significantly more likely to reduce, as we know, their paid working hours compared to women who do not. And then on top of that, we see growing older population in need of long-term care in many of the countries. The fact that many countries lack the institutional care infrastructure and a mechanism to support home-based care. On top of that, we have increased migration of care workers in countries like Ukraine, for example, that already even further restricting the domestic supply of care. So we have a perfect storm in many ways coming up in Central and Eastern Europe.
If I can come in also, I just want to share that we in Queisser, we are now looking at the so-called centrist generation, that are women, or mostly women, who are caring for their own children, but at the same time also caring for their parents. And they have specific needs, and it's also good to take this group in the loop when we're talking about share the care, because this is a multiple risk group, let's say.
Indeed, Annemie. Yes, excellent point there as well.
Yes,
please, go ahead. Colin, go ahead.
Very briefly, earlier this year we adopted a green paper on aging in the European Commission, and one of the first initiatives coming out of that would be a communication and a plan on long-term care, and this would be looking both at the quality of that care and also the access to that care, looking both at formal and informal. So this is something that we will be coming up with during the course of next year.
Really happy to hear that, Colin. It's so important, and especially given what we've seen during this COVID-19 pandemic and the really dramatic impact it had on our older people in the region, and especially living in long-term care facilities. So I think that's a really great priority. We also received some comments on the chat, just to share them with you. Somebody has said, really illustrative, regardless of gender, age, or country of origin, people talk about the same aspirations about work, families, education, and opportunities. Someone else said, yes, it's about rights, the human right to have both work and family, no matter where you live. So those are some of the good comments. Comments also from Tina Bruno, who is the founder of Parent Smart. I mentioned her earlier. She's a UNFPA partner. And she says, yes, it is often more a question of attitudes and norms than policies, both from managers and colleagues at work, but also friends and family. So another comment, let's also make visible the often invisible competence development at home. Parenting is one of the best leadership courses you can get. A great value at work too. That's absolutely true. So those are just some of the comments we received. I don't know if before I close, if any of our panelists would like to say any last words. Yes, Colin, I see your hand.
Thank you. I just want to say one word. I know that the main topic here is the gender angle to these policies, but I want to say one word about children, because children are also a very important, let's say, beneficiary of many of these policies. Bearing in mind the fact that even in the European Union, we still have 20% of children who are living in poverty, which means that the opportunities that they have are very much severely reduced. But also another angle to this is the fact that we are trying to come up with a series of policies which bearing in mind the rights of children, to ensure that children who benefit from family policies in one place can also benefit from those rights across the European Union, because the European Union, after all, is a union of mobility, where rights that you have in one country should be rights that you are able to avail yourself in another. And with our freedom of movement and our freedom of persons, of goods, and of services, we should also be able to have a freedom of movement of rights and of benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Anyone else wish to take the floor before I conclude?
Can I just say a word about this children approach? I think it is indeed, Colin, very interrelated well-being between children and their families. And therefore, in COFACE, we are advocating for having the two-generation approach systematically in every measure that is taken, so that you do not only focus on children, but that you take their context, so their family also in account. And if we do so, then it is in the best interest of everybody. So the two-generation approach should be systematically. And we are also discussing the child guarantee, offering children the guarantee in different fields. And sometimes I have the feeling that they are not thinking about families. So therefore, I think it's important to say the two-generation approach is very crucial to take it.
In fact, we talk a lot about intergenerational solidarity, which is also one way of saying it, but I agree with you.
Yes, and we in UNFPA speak about the life cycle approach, because really at the end of the day, the families, we're talking about children, we're talking about women and men and older persons. So I think these points that you're raising are fundamental. Does anyone else wish to take the floor? Okay, I don't see any more hands, so I will just conclude with a heartfelt thanks to all of the speakers and panelists for a lively and insightful discussion, and all of you who joined us on Facebook Live today for listening in and sharing your comments. I think it has become very clear how central family policies are, not only for achieving gender equality, but also economic growth, and for addressing some of the pressing demographic changes that we're facing in the region. We have heard that providing choices is important, but that we also need to look beyond choices and look at capabilities, making sure people are able to use the choices that they have. We heard about the massive potential impact of closing the gender gap in labor force participation and how this can lead to a massive boost in GDP. It's also interesting to note that countries facing low fertility and population aging would benefit the most. Interesting also to hear evidence on how work-family balance is a win-win for business. It's good for the bottom line in terms of staff retention and some of the other areas that were mentioned by our speakers. It's also very important to focus on fathers and paternity leave, but we must ensure that that fathers actually take this leave. And so there's a need for social norm change, which came out clearly in the conversation. We heard about the need to recognize women's unpaid work, which really makes societies work. So care responsibilities are a key barrier, and this became especially clear during the COVID-19 pandemic. We've heard some great practices from Gidi Gidior on how to remove barriers and expand choices for women so that they can fulfill their career, family, and fertility aspirations. And we at UNFPA are actually working on many of these areas as part of our demographic resilience program, which places a strong emphasis on family-friendly policies as part of this needed policy mix. Initiatives to address harmful gender norms and stereotypes, which I mentioned earlier, including on unpaid care work within the context of our EU for Gender Equality program funded by the EU. But also we're working on promoting family-friendly workplaces and gender-responsive family policies with programs like our Expanding Choices project, which is funded by Austria. We also work on the Best Workplaces for Parents initiative supported by Sweden, just to give a few of the examples of the types of initiatives that we are supporting with member states. I think this has been a really inspiring event. It's clear that the case for gender responsive family policies is overwhelming, so many good practices, but also clear that we're not even near tapping into the potential that well-developed family policies could offer for individuals, families, and societies and economies as a whole in our region. So UNFPA is fully committed to take this work forward together with all of you. And I would like to thank our panelists for the inspiring and engaging discussion. To our viewers on Facebook, thank you for your attention and for your active participation. And please continue the conversation online using the hashtag Expanding Choices. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day wherever you are in our beautiful region. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's join forces for the future.
Let's join forces, all of us.
Bye.
Bye.